Hi everyone, today I'm going to show you my tips and my Today I'm going to show you and talk to you about my tips and guidelines to learning any song in 24 hours. And this doesn't just apply to the advanced guys, this applies to anyone watching, whether it's a bass player, a guitarist, a drummer, whether you just started playing yesterday, whether you've played for a few years, or whether you class yourself as a professional musician. All of this will really help you, so stick around. We're about to go through the entire list, and as long as it all makes sense, I guarantee you'll be working songs out faster. You might not work it out in 24 hours yet, but give yourself a chance and you will be able to work out most songs in 24 hours, and then you'll get even better, and then that's when you can learn any song in 24 hours, because you've got to develop your hearing. So you're not going to be able to work out any song in 24 hours straight away, but stick with it and I guarantee you will. Doesn't matter where you are right now at this very moment. So strap yourselves in, let's get started. Step one is going to be listening to whatever song you want to work out by ear and working out where the repeats are. And what I mean by that is working out where the repeats are for your instrument. So for example, we have a verse. A verse normally plays the same chords at least a few times. So if we've got 4 chords in the verse, you tend to hear those 4 chords in the same order, usually 2 to 4 to 8 times before it does anything else. So if you can hear that, mark that down on a booklet, on a notepad, on your computer. Just mark down the bits that you need to learn because it does repeat. If it's not a true repetition, which means there's extra notes in and there's other things going on, then yeah, it's not going to help. But a lot of songs do repeat, especially bass lines, because that's what makes it groove. That's what makes people dance. So as soon as you can hear any repetition going on in the bass line, jot it down, because then it means you don't have to learn something 8 times. You just have to learn it once and then learn to play it 8 times, which is different. So learning it by ear, you just need to work out that tiny little section and then you can play it again and again and again until it goes to whatever it is that comes next. So a really random example is Le Freak by CHIC. That bass line repeats itself all the way through the verse and the chorus. So the idea is if you learn how to play that little tiny section once, you can repeat that a lot, and then when it does change and when there is like things that go off trail and off track, you can then also hear those, mark where they are, and you've actually saved yourself a lot of time in learning a song, because you don't need to learn it from start to finish because it repeats a lot. So that is number one, really important. Make sure you can hear where the repetition is and mark it down so you know exactly what you need to learn and how many times you need to play it. Step 2 is to mark out the song in sections. So if you've got an intro, mark intro. If you've got a verse, mark verse, chorus, bridge, etc. The reason why we do this is because you know the song in order. So if you worked out the entire verse for one song, chances are most songs, when you get to the second verse later in the song, chances are it's going to be exactly the same. So the first verse and the second verse, from a bass playing point of view, usually is about 90% likely to be the same. There might be a few little notes here and there might be a few tasty fills, but you know that you don't have to learn the whole thing. You've just got to learn this tiny little fill, and then the rest of it slots in perfectly. So that is step 2. Write down all of your sections for the song you want to learn by ear. Really important, and these 2 things will get you off to a really good flying start, because then you know the song, even if it's 4 minutes long, it might only be 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes of actual bass lines you need to learn, and then they're just repeated to make 4.5 minutes of a song. So bear that in mind, it's going to be really useful moving forward. Step 3 is to work out the scale of the song. And this is something that takes a little bit of time and something that you should know the notes of the fretboard for, because it allows you to then move the notes you've just worked out to other strings. So my tip for working out the scale of any song is to pick one string of the bass guitar, E, A, D or G, does not matter. I'm just going to pick D because that's just the random thing that I've just done. So on the D string, I'm going to play from 0, the open string, all the way up to 12. Whatever song you're listening to should have 7 notes that sound really good during that song. Those 7 notes make up the scale. They're not going to make up the bass line, so don't get distracted. I gotta rub my nose, sorry. So those 7 notes are going to make up the scale, not the bass line. So don't get distracted by the bass line in the song, because we're not working that out just yet. We're basically finding the 7 frets between 0 and 12 that sound good. And if you can find them, that tells you what your scale is. The hardest part of all of this is knowing what the actual notes are, A, B, F sharp, etc., because then you can move them to different strings. If a G on the D string sounds good, the G on the E string is also going to sound okay. The G on the A string is going to sound okay as well, because all of them are the same note. They're just higher and lower. Just a disclaimer, if 0 is in the scale, 12 will also be in the scale, because 0 and 12 are the same note. So on the D string that I just picked, the open D string, which is 0, is also the same as the 12th fret on the D string. 1 is just an octave higher, which means it just sounds higher in tuning because you're going higher up. It's almost like going higher up the piano. You're just going higher up the scale, so it sounds higher, but it's still a D. So if you can find 7 notes on one string that sound good, if you know what the notes are, you can apply them across the whole bass. This is going to make your ear training and learning a song by ear faster because you already know the scale. The other thing we need to work out, which is really important so you know exactly what scale you're in, is we need to work out what the first note of the song is. So if you listen to a song, try and work out what the first note, the first major note of the bass line is. And if you can work that out, that is usually the root note of your scale. So you can take the notes you've just learned on the string, the first note of the song, put them together. That is the scale of your song. So your 4th tip is to then move all of the notes that you just worked out on one string to every string. So if a G is in the scale, find all the G's on the other strings. And the reason for this is because if there's a bass fill in the song, they might play a higher octave G than you've heard previously in the song. But if you're not aware of where these notes are, you're going to spend 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes trying to find it. Whereas if you know it's really high,
if it's a really high sound,
it's going to be the D or the G string, and it's probably going to be quite high up the neck as well. So if you know where all of the notes are of the scale here, you're going to be able to find the note you're looking for faster. So notes of the fretboard go together with the scale, bang, everything makes a lot more sense. You won't have to struggle to find the notes. You've just got to use your ears to hear how high or low it is, and then try and pick out the one note that you need. So that is number 4. Apply the notes of the scale across to the fretboard, all of the strings. Really useful. Tip number 5, not necessarily a tip, but it's something people don't do. Very logical. When you're working out a song by ear, what happens? Well, you might get so far and then you have to stop because something else comes up, someone else interrupts, something happens and you have to put the bass down and go and do something. So I recommend you either score the music out on your computer if you're good enough to do that and if you know how to score music. If you're not good enough to score out music because you haven't done it before, just get a notepad, draw 4 lines across it. That is now tab. Every time you work out a note of the bass line, draw in the fret on the right string. And the reason why is because you could work out all of the song by ear in 24 hours or less and then forget it by the next day. And that is a really annoying thing that happens to everyone. So notepad or notation, you want to use one or the other depending on how you want to do this, but it's a really useful thing. So that is tip number 5, get a notepad or learn to score your music in a computer or by hand, because then you'll never forget anything that you learn by ear, and that is really, really useful. Trust me. I've been there and forgotten songs because I've learned it really quickly, and it's my fault because I'm an idiot. Don't be like me. Make sure that you're not the idiot. Trust me. So our next tip, which is tip number 6, is to do this pattern and to follow this pattern every single time. And it goes listen, play, listen, repeat. And the reason why it goes like that is because if you want to play something by ear, you need to be able to hear it first. So when you listen to a little bit of a song, it could be 2 notes, it could be a bar of music, it could be the whole verse. When you listen, you need to actually listen to it. Don't try and play the bass line over the top. Don't try and play loads of notes on bass over the top of the song, because when you do that, you get distracted. Your hearing can't focus entirely in detail on 2 things at the same time. So as soon as you start playing notes, you can hear they're wrong, but you can't actually hear what the notes are that you should be playing instead. So listen, make sure you can hear what you should be playing, then try and play it either on your own in silence with no track, basically, or try and play it with the track on in the background. And then if you think you've got it, have another listen to it, and then you repeat. So we do more listening than playing. And I guarantee if you do more listening than playing when you're trying to work something out by ear, once your ear gets to a certain level, you'll be able to listen to it once and be able to play 2-3 bars off the top of your head by ear, because you just know how it sounds. You can hear where the notes are going. You can hear if it goes lower, goes higher. You can work all this stuff out. Really practical, really simple, and trust me, it's actually better for you. So that was tip number 6. Follow the rules of listen, play, listen, repeat. Remember that. Tip number 7, if you're keeping up, I think I am. I don't think I've missed any. 7. 7 comes after 6, right? So tip number 7 is to
slow it down.
And you can use software to help you. I'm not going to recommend any because there's quite a lot and you can find your own. You can also slow it down from YouTube videos, but all I recommend is if you can't work it out by ear, slow it down. Either hum it out loud if you can hum accurately in tune and slow down what you're humming, or try and sing along by using la's or do's or re's, etc. Just make a noise, but make sure you're in tune with the bass line, not the vocal line and not the guitar part, etc. And if you can't do that, because it is difficult, I'm not an amazing singer, so I can't do that. What we do is we slow the track down by using technology, because then that allows your ears to hear the sound in a more isolated moment. It makes all the notes longer because obviously it's slower, and that way you can hear it a little bit more in detail and find these notes. Really useful for bass fills, or if you're learning jazz fusion or progressive metal. If you're playing something really fast, you're going to have to slow it down, just so you make sure that you can actually hear all the notes and you're playing all the notes. So that was tip number 7, to slow it right down. Really useful, really useful. Tip number 8 is to come back tomorrow. So when you can work out a song by ear in 24 hours or less, or even if you can't, say you learn half of it in 24 hours, that's still amazing. Like, you should give yourself a pat on the back. That is incredible. Sometimes it takes weeks or months to learn stuff by ear. So if you can learn a lot of it in a day, that is crazy. That is really good. But what you want to do is come back tomorrow, because everything you've wrote down, everything you think is right, if you relax your hearing and you rest your ears, when you come back, you're going to hear things slightly differently. You may think the notes that you've played are bang on. No one can tell you otherwise. You're like, that's 100% correct. No one's ever going to tell me otherwise because I'm right, they're wrong, whatever. Deal with it. That's not going to happen when you come back tomorrow, because you're like, ooh, that note sounds a little bit different. And it's literally going to be maybe 1 or 2 notes, but it's because when you listen to music with a lot of intent and a lot of detail, your hearing actually gets tired. And when your hearing gets tired, you start hearing things incorrectly. It's not something you do on purpose, it just happens. So when you've learned quite a lot of the song, or if you've learned all of it, make sure you've got it all jotted down. If you really want to go through it all, you can, but rest, relax, come back tomorrow and see how much of it you still think is correct. Really, really useful. So that was tip number 8, to come back tomorrow. There is no shame in putting down the pen, putting down the paper, and just relaxing and then coming back and going, I actually think that sounds right. Then you're on to a winner. Everything is fine. Tip number 9, almost did 10. Tip number 9 is basically to record yourself. It doesn't have to be professional recording, it just has to be good enough for you to hear what you're playing. It could be done through your computer, it could be done through an interface or a mixing desk professionally. It could also be done through the microphone on your phone. So it doesn't actually matter, but the reason why I say to record yourself is because when you're busy playing all of these things you've just learned by ear, you get distracted by the movement, by the fingers, by the technique, by trying to make it sound good. If you record yourself, what's going to happen is you're going to come back and listen to that recording afterwards, or the night after, or the day after. What's going to happen is you're going to go, that doesn't actually sound as accurate as I thought it did. I'm playing the rhythm wrong, or I'm playing a few notes wrong, or that bass fill that I thought was correct is just not right. So when you record yourself, it means you can be a bit more subjective because you can focus exactly on what you've done rather than trying to play it in the moment. It's the reason why a lot of musicians nowadays record themselves, because it's really useful. So that was tip number 9, to record yourself and to listen back to it to see if you think you're good enough at what you just played. So our final tip for this lesson, which is tip number 10, is once you've done all of these things and you think you've got the song learnt, whether it took more than 24 hours or whether you've just cracked it and you've done it in 23 or 10 hours, it doesn't matter how long it takes, but you will be able to learn any song in 24 hours or less once you get comfortable with it. So our 10th tip for today is you want to play through the whole song with all of the repeats in all of the correct structure, and you don't have to do this by memory, but the reason why we do it with all of the repeats, because this is going back to step 1 and step 2, tip 1 and tip 2. The reason why we do this is because you might hear one note or two notes that actually are slightly different that you didn't realize before. And while you're playing along to the song, as long as you're not louder than the song and the song is balanced with your playing, as soon as you play a wrong note, even if it's one, it will jump out at you and basically slap you across the face and say, this is clearly wrong. So when we play through the whole thing from start to finish, that is your final test to kind of finally put a massive tick through the tab or the notation that you've wrote and basically go, yep, that is 100% accurate. I'm happy with that. And to be fair, if you're not happy with it, don't worry. All of this is a natural progression. You're not going to be amazing at it straight away, but give yourself a few months or a few years and you'll be cracking this in no time. So that was my 10 tips to learn any song in 24 hours. And I guarantee if you stick to it, you'll be able to do it too. So if you found this video really useful and the information very practical, because that's a good thing too, we want it to be practical, then hit that like button below and hit that subscribe button to follow us on YouTube. We've got plenty of content for you guys to watch when you've got some spare time. So thank you for watching. Good luck with learning a song in 24 hours, and I'll see you again next time.